So let's start with the app itself, and the first thing we want to rename this main activity to be the login activity. So you can select the file from here, right click, refactor, and choose rename, or use the shortcut shift plus F6. So this will bring up the rename dialog and change it from main activity to login. Now let's go and rename the layout file because it is still activity underscore main.xml. Select it, right click, and choose refactor, and then rename, or use the shortcut shift plus F6. This will bring up the rename dialog and change it to activity underscore login. So now we rename it the two files correctly. Let's start designing the login activity. So go ahead and do activity underscore login.xml. We still have the hello world text view selected and deleted using the delete key in the keyboard, and we delete it. So let's start adding to edit text because we want the user to log in using an email and a password. From the text section here, go ahead and select email from here and drag it and drop it inside the layout. But now this view is not constrained, so let's constrain it to the left and to the right and to the top, and give it a 32 dp from the top. And now let's go ahead and change the ID to email field, and of course click refactor from here. Let's scroll down and go to the hint, and the hint should be email so the user can see or know what expected to be written in this field. Let's go ahead and add another thing is a password field. So drag and drop it from here, constrain it to the left of the parent, to the right of the parent, and top to the bottom of the email field. Let's go up and give it a 32 dp of margin, and again let's rename the ID to password field. Now let's click refactor and rename it. Again scroll down and change the hint attribute from the common attribute section to password. So now we have the email and password. Let's go and add two buttons. One button is it will help us to log in, and the other button it will navigate the user to the register screen where he can register using his information. So from the common, select button and drag it and drop it inside the layout, constrain it to the left of the parent and top to the bottom of the password field. Scroll up, and from the constraint widget, give it a 32 dp of margin top and a 16 dp of margin left. Rename the ID to login button and choose refactor, of course, and of course rename the text or change the text again to login. So now we have the login button. Let's go ahead and drag and drop another button, constrain it to the right, and top constrain it to the bottom of the password field, 32 dp of margin top and 16 of margin right. Change the ID to register button, click refactor, and change the text to register. Now to give those two buttons a visual difference, let's go ahead and change the style of the register because the login functionality is the main call to action button in this screen. So let's go down. After we select the register, make sure register is selected, and from style scroll down and choose text button from here, and now we should see this style of the text button. So now the user can know that the login is the main functionality of this screen because it stands out and it looks more visual appearing to the user. Another thing we want to do is to select those two buttons. Of course, you can select them from the component tree by holding shift and selecting those two elements. Right click on them and choose chains and create horizontal chain. So now we want to create this horizontal chain to divide the spacing equally between those two elements. So let's run the application and see if the design looks like exactly what we want. So now this is the final result of the login activity, and as you can see we have the email. The user can type his email and of course the password, and as you can see it will appear as black dots, so it is not visual to any person maybe sitting next to another user or the user of the app. And of course we have the register button, but now both of them doesn't do anything. Now let's create the register activity. So right click, new activity from here, and choose an empty activity from the available template. Rename it to be register activity and hit finish, and this should create an empty activity for us. Let's go ahead and design the screen activity underscore register.xml. So we want the user to register using email, password, and a name. So let's select from the text category, let's select a plain text from here, plain edit text field. Let me just zoom in so you can see correctly, and let's constrain this to the left, to the right, and of course to the top. Give it a 32 dp of margin, and of course let's rename the id to be the name field, and click refactor. Get rid of the text and scroll down to the hint, and the hint should be name. So now we have the name field. Let's go ahead and add an email field from here. Choose an email field and constrain it to the left and right, and constrain top to the bottom of the name, and let's give it a 32 dp of margin. Change the id to be email field and choose refactor. So let's click continue. Let's also change the hint. The hint should be an email like this, and of course last but not least, get the password from here, drag it and drop it inside the layout, constrain it to the left of the parent, to the right of the parent, and we also need at least one vertical constraint. We want it underneath the email field. From here, give it a 32 dp of margin, and of course we can change the id to password field, and click refactor, continue, and of course we want to change the hint also to be password. So now we have the name, email, and password. What we need is a button, so go to the common section, drag and drop a button right here, constrain it to the left, constrain it to the right, and of course constrain top to the bottom of the password like this. Give it a 32 dp of margin, and also change the id to be not login but register button. Choose refactor, continue, and also we have the text, change it to be register. So now we have the name, email, password, and register. So we are done with the design. Now let's hook a click listeners for those two buttons. So let's go to login activity, and of course this is the layout. We have a button that is a login button, and we also have the register button. Let's go to login activity, and from here let's create a variable, call it login button, and find it by its ID using find view by ID, and of course it's a button. So now let's get the ID. We have the login button. Let's import the class. Now let's hook for the login button. Let's hook a click listener. So you set on click listener and make sure you selected the lambda version of the click listener because it is more cleaner. So when the user clicks on this, we want to log in the user, and also we have the register button. Let's find it by ID, and of course it's a button, and we have the ID as register button. So now we have the login button and register button. For the register button, let's hook a click listener also. So when the user click on the register button inside the login activity, which is this, we want to take it and navigate it to the register activity. So that is very easy. We will use start activity function, and we pass the intent, and the intent requires two things: the context, which is this, and of course where you want to go. So I'm going to register activity column class dot java, and this should get the job done. If we run the application, now as you can see, if we clicked on the register button, it will take us to the register activity, and it will get back if we click the back arrow. Implement a parent activity, so we can have the back button, parent activity name, and also a title for each activity. And that is easy. Go to the Android manifest.xml, find the activity tag. Let's close the tag right here, and in the register activity we want to specify the parent activity name to be the login activity. So this is the activity that it will take us back to when we hit the back arrow at the toolbar. And of course we want the title or the label, called label, and let's make it register. And for the login activity we just want the label, so the label is login. So let's run the application again and see the result. Now as you can see, now we have the label in the login activity, and if we go to the register activity, we have the label and the back arrow that will take us back to the login activity. Now let's start implementing the authentication, and let's go to tools, Firebase, and this will bring up the Firebase assistant tool. From here we want to choose the authentication, and from here add Firebase authentication to your app, and this will add this dependency, but of course we will change the version number because it is outdated, as you can see from here in the build.gradle file, because we have the implementation platform way of declaring the dependencies version, so we write the version only once. So let's cut this and put it right here, and let's get rid of the version number because it is globally and it is available right here. Go up here and synchronize the project. So now we synchronize the project, and the first thing we want to do is get back to our Firebase console and go to the authentication section here. Now click get started and wait. So we have a couple of sign-in methods. We want to enable the email and password, and this is very important step. So let's enable it from here and make sure you saved the changes. Now email and password is enabled. Let's get back to Android Studio, and now I am in the register activity. If we take a look at the layout, we have three fields: name, email, password, and a register button. So in the register activity, let's declare the name using find view by ID, and it's a edit text RID name field. Again, we have email field using find view by ID and edit text r.id.email field, and of course we have the password field using find view by ID, and it's an edit text password field. So now we have the fields. Let's also initialize the button, and it's a register button. Find view by ID, it's a button, and let's find it by the ID. So now we have the register button, and once the user clicks on it, let's implement a click listener. We want to start registering the user using name, email, and password. For now, let's omit the name and focus on the email and password to make sure everything is correct. So when the user clicks on register button, first thing we want to validate the input. We don't want an empty email field or a password field. So we can easily check the email field, and we grab the text inside the email field and make sure if it is empty, or the password field dot text dot is empty. So if the password field is empty or the email field is empty, we don't want to continue with the registration process because the fields are empty. So we'll show the user a toast. The toast will require a context and of course a message, and I will say fill all the fields please. Okay, now we will specify the length of the toast. So we have a long and short. Let's make it short, and of course we want to show the toast. So now if the fields are empty, one of them or both of them, this code will be executed and we will show the user a toast. Else you want to continue with the register process, and let's grab the email and password and collect them and put them inside the variable. So I have the email, which is equal the email field dot text, and convert it to a string. Also we have the password from here, and it's a password. Get the text and convert it to a string. So now we have the email and password. Let's create a method to keep things clean that will take care of the registration process. It's a private, fun, and let's rename it register user, and it will take two things for now. It will take an email and it will also take a password, both of type string. So now let's open and close the curly braces. So now when we collected the email and password, we can simply send it to register user function, send the email and also send the password. So now we have the email and password entered by the user. To authenticate the user, it is very easy using the Firebase authentication class. So use Firebase authentication, get an instance, and we have a method called create user with email and password, and it will take an email and password and it will take care of the registration process. So we have the email and pass also the password. Now we want a way to find out if the registration is correct or not, because the user can enter an invalid email. For example, he can enter a bunch of numbers, and that is not a valid email. To do that, we can hook a callback called add incomplete listener. We can add an incomplete listener, and this incomplete listener have a task parameter. This is a lambda function, of course, a task parameter, and we can check this task parameter if it's successful or not. So we can check if the task is successful. That means the registration is successful and the user information is valid, or if it's not successful, the else case will get executed, and in the else case we can copy this toast and change the message to be register failed. And also, of course, for now we can change or just show a toast if the register is successful. So register success here, and in the else case register failed. Okay, so this register success. So now when the user register correctly, we get a toast register success, or we get a toast register failed. Let's run the application and see if it works or not. So this is the application. Let's go to the register, and of course the name is not, we didn't use the name yet. Let's go to the email and write something, a valid email with that at gmail.com, for example. And of course Firebase requires at least the password to be an 8 character. So let's click register. Once we click register, it should give us register success or register failed depending on the information. So now we get register success. That means the registration process is done. And if we get back to authentication, let's go to the users tab, and we should find the registered user email, and of course the provider, which is an email and password, the date and the ID. And of course, as an admin, you can delete or disable the account. So the registration process works fine. Of course, if we, for example, entered an invalid email, this is an invalid email. It's a valid string but not a valid email. So let's hit register and find out. As you can see, we get the toast register failed because the email is not valid. So registration process now works. Now let's implement the login. Go to the login activity, and we have the login button, we have the register button. We also want the two fields that we have, the email, as you can see, and the password. Let's go to login and close other tabs, and right here create an email field variable and find it by ID, and of course it's an edit text, so it's an email field. Duplicate the line and change this to password field, and of course it's the password field ID. And from here in the login, we will use the same way to validate the emptiness of the fields. So we will check if the email field dot text dot is empty, or password field dot text dot is empty. If one of them is empty, we will show a toast. I just pasted the toast code, and we will say that please fill all the fields, else that means everything is good and we can start collecting the data and gathering the data from the fields. So let's create a variable called email, and it will equal the text of the email converted to a string. Also we have the password which is a password field dot text dot to string. So now we have the email and password. Let's create a function that will handle the login functionality. So now we call private, it's a private function, private fun login user, and it will take two things: the email of type string, password of type string. Let's open and close the curly braces. And to log in the user, we can use also the Firebase authentication class. Let's get an instance of this class, and then we have a method called sign in with email and password, and it will take an email and password. To make sure that this process is completed correctly or not, we can attach an onComplete listener callback that takes a task argument as a parameter, and we can check, of course, if this task is successful. If it's successful, we can show a toast that the login success. Else, we will show another toast that says email or password, email slash password is wrong. So now we have the method. Let's call it here and pass the email and password. So this will log in already registered user. If the user already registered, it will log in, or it will show a message that the email and password is incorrect. So let's enter an invalid or an unregistered email alongside with a password and click login. So now we should have a toast. As you can see, we have the toast email password is wrong because the email and password are wrong. So let's go ahead and enter registered user information. So we have a user with this email, and we should get a toast that says login success. So now the login is succeeded, and of course the registration process also works fine. In the next video, we will store the data of the users inside the Firebase, and will navigate the user to another activity if the login is successful.